The moment Victoria Ashford walked into the restaurant, the temperature in the room seemed to drop. Waitresses froze mid-step, trays trembling in their hands, because everyone in Charleston knew her name, and everyone knew what happened to people who displeased her. She was the daughter of one of the wealthiest men in South Carolina, and for 3 years, she had made Le Bernardin Grill her personal battlefield, reducing staff to tears, getting people fired with a single phone call, and walking through the world as though kindness were a weakness she refused to carry. No one dared look her in the eye. No one, except a new waitress named Grace Whitfield, who had just started her first shift that Tuesday evening, unaware that she was about to change everything. If this story about courage and second chances is already touching your heart, take a moment to like this video, drop a comment below, share it with someone who needs a little hope today, and subscribe to the channel, because we believe in stories where kindness still wins, even against impossible odds. Grace was 24, working 2 jobs to support her ailing mother, and she had heard the warnings from the other staff before her first shift even began. Stay quiet. Don't make eye contact. Just take her order and disappear, whispered Rosalind, a waitress who had worked there for 6 years and still flinched every time Victoria entered. But Grace had grown up in a small town in Georgia where her grandmother taught her that everyone, no matter how cold they seemed, was carrying something heavy beneath the surface. She didn't believe in monsters. She believed in wounds. That night, Victoria sat alone at her usual table by the window, dressed in black, her face unreadable, her fingers drumming impatiently against the white tablecloth. She snapped at the sommelier for bringing the wrong vintage. She sent back an appetizer without tasting it. The entire kitchen staff moved like they were walking on broken glass. When it was time for Grace to approach the table, her hands were shaking, but she steadied herself and walked forward anyway. What happened next stunned everyone watching. Instead of rushing through the order like every waitress before her, Grace knelt slightly beside the table, looked Victoria directly in the eyes, and said something no one expected. She noticed the small, tarnished locket half hidden beneath Victoria's expensive silk scarf, and gently asked if it had once belonged to someone she loved. The restaurant went silent. Victoria's face changed, just for a second, a flicker of something raw and unguarded breaking through the ice she had spent years building. She quickly composed herself and told Grace to mind her own business, but her voice cracked in a way it never had before. Grace didn't push. She simply smiled, took the order, and walked away, but something had shifted in the air, something the other staff could feel even if they didn't understand it yet. Over the following weeks, Victoria kept returning, always sitting in Grace's section, always testing her with sharp words and impossible demands, as if daring her to break like everyone else. But Grace never did. She brought Victoria's coffee exactly the way she liked it without being told twice. She remembered that Victoria hated cilantro and always double-checked the kitchen. She never gossiped about her, never complained, and never once looked at her with fear. Slowly, painfully, Victoria began to let her guard down in small, almost invisible ways, a quiet thank you here, a lingering glance there. One rainy November evening, after the restaurant had closed and most of the staff had gone home, Grace found Victoria sitting alone at the bar, staring at that same tarnished locket, tears silently falling down her face for the first time anyone had ever witnessed. She confessed that the locket held a photograph of her mother, who had died when Victoria was only 12 years old, and that her father, consumed by grief and business empire building, had never once looked at her the same way again. She told Grace that everyone in her life either feared her or wanted something from her, and that she had built walls so high because vulnerability had only ever led to abandonment. She admitted that the name people whispered when they thought she couldn't hear, the Ice Queen, the monster's daughter, had become easier to accept than the truth of who she really was, a grieving little girl who had never been allowed to mourn. Grace sat beside her, not as a waitress and a billionaire's daughter, but as one human being beside another, and she gently said that grief hidden for too long doesn't disappear, it just waits, quietly, for someone brave enough to see it. That night, for the first time in years, Victoria Ashford let someone see her without the armor. Word of their unlikely friendship spread through the restaurant, and slowly, the fear that once suffocated the staff began to soften into something else, understanding. Victoria started arriving with a gentler presence, occasionally even helping the newer staff learn the menu, something no one could have imagined months earlier. She personally funded Grace's mother's medical treatment without ever being asked, quietly, without press releases or recognition, because for once in her life, she wanted to give simply because she cared, not because it was expected of her. 6 months later, Victoria stood in front of the entire restaurant staff during a private gathering and did something extraordinary. She thanked Grace publicly, revealing that the hidden name everyone feared wasn't really her identity at all. It was a mask she wore to survive a childhood no one had bothered to understand. She said that Grace was the first person in years who looked past the name, past the money, past the fear, and simply saw a girl who needed someone to believe she was worth knowing. If this story moved you even a little, if it reminded you that behind every hardened heart there might be a story waiting to be understood, please take a moment to like this video and share it with someone who needs to hear it today. And before we close this story, I want to ask you something important. In the comments below, tell me this: have you ever misjudged someone before truly knowing their story? Share your experience, because your words might be exactly what someone else needs to read today. In the end, Grace never set out to change Victoria's life. She simply chose kindness when fear would have been easier, and in doing so, she uncovered something far more powerful than any hidden name. She uncovered a broken heart that only needed one person willing to stay long enough to see it heal. Sometimes, the bravest thing we can do isn't standing up to power. It's choosing compassion when the whole world tells us to be afraid.